the online safety bill has passed through Parliament. It's been rumbling on for quite a while now. There have been various modifications to it. And they are telling us, the government is saying, this is going to enhance our free speech protections online. Is that true?
Absolutely not. This idea that it's going to protect free speech has come about maybe in the past week or so. This bill has been in the making for 5 years. I mean, if you think about the online safety bill, it used to be called online harms.
Yes.
But the main harm that they're trying to tackle is psychological harm. That is, people being offended. That's what this bill sets out, really, to prevent, and that necessarily is going to have an impact on free speech.
Because I'm confused about this, because in early drafts of the bill, they were talking about sanctioning legal but harmful speech, and they used the phrase legal but harmful, which I find quite chilling as a phrase, actually, because who gets to decide? Am I right in thinking they're kind of smuggling that phraseology in the back door again?
So it's interesting that phrase doesn't appear in the bill, but it appears in all of the government's press releases, so something like it is what we can expect. The harms that the government are going to censor haven't yet been decided. They will appear before Parliament.
Yes.
But once Parliament approves that, then the Minister will have the right. The Culture Minister, at the moment that's Nadine Dorries, but it could be anyone in the future, will have the right to introduce new harms as they are invented or as they appear. And all of the big tech platforms have a duty to report emerging harms, as they call it, to the government.
So what this does effectively is it means that Ofcom end up regulating the internet. And they're quite severe penalties for social media tech giants who don't remove content of this kind, right?
Yeah, so if they fail to comply with Ofcom, there can be massive fines of up to 10% of turnover for these big tech giants, and potentially executives can be put in jail for 2 years.
But doesn't that just mean they're going to censor everything?
Exactly. So that's not going to happen. Mark Zuckerberg is not going to stand up against the government for your right to free speech. It means that they're going to proactively censor things so as to avoid being fined by the government or getting in trouble with Ofcom. They will be more than happy to comply with these rules, and they will zealously, enforce free speech restrictions in order to avoid getting through this process.
Have the government at all addressed this point that if we're saying that the government of the day gets to decide what is harmful, what is offensive, are there any protections in place for a future government, which is perhaps a bit more pernicious, to decide that criticism of the government is harmful or whatever?
I don't think there are any protections in this. I mean, the way the government is trying to sell this, as you mentioned earlier, is that it strengthens free speech. Their argument is that it won't be up to big tech to decide what can be censored or not. They don't get to decide what types of speech are permissible and not. But in many ways, the big tech is still enforcing this. It's just the government is deciding on a framework. So it doesn't really make that much of a difference.
OK, because they are saying, because there have been a lot of complaints about the partisan nature of online censorship. And so effectively, Facebook or Twitter or whoever says, we don't like gender-critical feminists, so we'll just blitz their accounts, which they do often, even if they've said nothing offensive at all, so just about a matter of opinion. But the government is claiming that this will actually redress that problem. Is that right?
They are claiming that. I don't buy it at all. One thing the government is saying that sounds in its favour is that there will be a right to appeal when posts are taken down. Now, that is something new. But I don't believe that the government is on such a different page as big tech. I mean, at the end of the day, it's responding to the problem of there being so much big tech censorship and then adding a law that's going to increase all of that censorship.
Well, because people often say that, these are private companies, they can censor whoever they like. We've got no, if they ditch you for whatever reason, that's their business. But doesn't this bill mean that there's now going to be a kind of collaboration between big tech and the state, and therefore it is censorship in the oldest definition of the term?
That's right. It's just state censorship that's outsourced to private companies.
Right.
And, I've never bought into this argument that just because Facebook and Twitter are private companies that they should decide who gets to say what. I mean, this
So why not? Why do you think that?
Because I think, these large social networks have become like the modern-day public square. They are the place where we do most of our, political debating, campaigning, things like that.
Yep.
And if you're cut out from Facebook, cut out from Twitter or YouTube, that's absolutely devastating to you, to your ability to interact with not just the online world, but with real-world politics.
And what about the government's argument that they say, well, this bill is going to help to clean up the internet of all those sort of terrible illegal things such as paedophilia and that kind of thing?
Well, this is a very sneaky aspect of the bill because it essentially it conflates things that are already illegal with things that are harmful and not illegal, or things that it considers to be harmful.
Yes.
So it says, on the one hand, we're going to deal with terrorism, knife crime, child abuse, all that kind of thing, while smuggling in this much more pernicious aspect, which is to get rid of harmful speech.
Because you can see why that might be effective, because everyone opposes those horrible things, but they are already illegal. And if you're putting them in the same bracket as offensive speech, and just that strikes me as a bit underhand.
Well, one of the problems with this bill, as it's been developing over the years, is that every time there is a scandal, something new gets added to it. It really is a massive bill that's trying to do all things at once. So it's almost as if I said to you, haven't you noticed that there's lots of crime that happens outside? So let's have an outdoor safety bill, and we're going to throw every single problem we can imagine. And when someone comes up with a new problem, it then gets added to this bill. So it is a real mess as a piece of legislation. It conflates all kinds of things, from serious things that are already criminal to ordinary speech that is just going to be deleted.
Yes.
It's a huge problem.
And what is the solution? Is it the case that there is sufficient pushback within Parliament against this bill, or are both sides of the House singing from the same hymn sheet?
They're singing from the same hymn sheet, as you'd imagine. Labour says it doesn't go far enough.
Of course they do.
Because it doesn't specifically mention Russian propaganda and disinformation.
OK, I see.
So
we're not going to... So, in other words, the bill is going to...
It's going to pass very comfortably. Everyone, unfortunately, across the political spectrum, there is, no appetite for supporting free speech.
So then how do we address it? Because do we leave it to groups like the Free Speech Union to push back? Are there many people who are going to push back, and how effective can that possibly be?
I think it is up to all of us to sort of push back. I think we need to raise awareness about this bill, for starters. I think a lot of people don't know it's happening, or if they know that it's happening, they think it is just addressing, scammers and fraudsters and terrorists and things like that. I think, we need to really push back against this before the internet becomes too cleansed and sanitised for us to even be able to have our say.
But it is also appealing to people's better natures in a way, because, a lot of people think, well, if you have these horrible people online saying these horrible things, wouldn't the world be a better place if we didn't have that? Wouldn't the world be a better place if we didn't have disinformation, fake news? People are worried about these things, and they think this might be the solution. Or maybe it's being offered as the kind of solution.
Yeah, but it's, it's always a false solution. Censorship is never the answer to our problems. I mean, if you think about something like disinformation, who do we allow to decide what is disinformation or not? Now, at the moment, the government is saying, well, we're going to stop big tech from deciding, and we're going to decide what is disinformation.
Right.
But facts change. Things change all the time. So think of two examples recently. The theory as to whether COVID leaked from a lab, I don't know if that's true. You don't know if that's true. No one knows. But 2 years ago, that was considered a conspiracy theory and was banned from Facebook and various other platforms.
Yes.
Now it's considered plausible, and it's believed by, at least plausible by the Biden administration, by the UK government. Or if you take something like the Hunter Biden laptop scandal.
Yes.
That was
Do you want to
written
just explain what happened there? Because I think a lot of people didn't know about it.
Yeah, so this was a huge expose by the New York Post in America, one of America's oldest newspapers. It's kind of a fun tabloid newspaper.
Yeah.
And it found all this compromising information stored on Hunter Biden's laptop, the son of Joe Biden, during the last election. Incredibly compromising, and it did drag in the then presidential candidate Joe Biden as well.
Yes.
And Facebook and Twitter censored it. They censored it on the grounds that it was misinformation, disinformation, possibly, even just Russian propaganda. Lots of security services wrote an open ex-spies wrote an open letter saying this was Russian propaganda.
Yes.
It's now very clear that it's real and it's true. So and the
government hasn't denied it, has it?
No,
or didn't at the time.
Biden never denied it at the time. Their campaign never denied it.
I thought that was particularly shocking, because at that time, this was an article, as you say, New York Post. It's not some blog on the corner of the internet. This is an established newspaper that was founded by Alexander Hamilton.
Yeah.
This is a big publication. They had their account locked, and you couldn't even share the link.
Yeah.
There was some program was put in, so you couldn't even pass the link on. Isn't that election interference by big tech?
It is. I don't think that the story would have been enough to sway the election, but the fact that they were interfering in that way was really alarming.
Yes.
So, we do obviously need to do something to get a handle on big tech and what it's censoring and what it allows. And, those are very real issues. But the problem is our government is looking at this and saying, well, big tech isn't doing enough to censor.
Right. So they're going about it the wrong way.
Yeah, they're saying, look at this crazy Wild West where you can say anything on the internet, and now everyone knows that that's not true.
Well, also, I mean, we can all agree that we can't trust Silicon Valley to censor in a non-partisan way.
Of course.
But can we possibly trust the government? I mean, isn't that the implication of this bill? You can't trust them, but you can trust us. We'll make the right decisions.
I mean, the government is always going to say it's always going to take a sort of hands-off approach. So it will, it will come up with broad categories like disinformation, harassment, those kinds of things, and then leave it to Ofcom. But I mean, so it's not going to be politically partisan. It's not going to, we're not going to find, Labour supporters censored or something like that in favour of the Tories. But at the end of the day, it's going to be kind of culturally partisan because we know that's how these institutions work. We know the kinds of views that populate the people who work for the government, the people who work in Silicon Valley.
Yes.
We know that there's a right thing you're allowed to say about trans issues or race issues and a wrong thing that you can't say about those issues, no matter how legitimate. So that's inevitable, really. So
what's the solution?
The solution is to keep making the arguments for free speech, to remind people that it's censorship is the real harm here. If we lose out on hearing things, then that's a greater loss to society than hearing offensive things.